Well, calls for a public inquiry, the search for answers, and what's the best way to get those answers. Let's bring in three members of Parliament to talk about all of this. Mona Fortier is a member of the House Committee on Ethics. Michael Cooper is the Justice Critic for the Official Opposition and a member of the House Justice Committee, which met today. And Charlie Angus is the Ethics Critic for the NDP. It's good to see you all. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.
Let me begin with this. We have Jody Wilson-Raybould in a surprise attendance at the Cabinet meeting this morning after she's quit Cabinet. She asks to come and speak to her former Cabinet colleagues. They say yes. She does that. Shortly after that, a Liberal member on the Justice Committee decides that, in fact, Liberals do want to hear from Jody Wilson-Raybould at the committee. And so I guess I'm trying to connect those dots. Does Mona Fortier, do we have a sense of rapprochement here, that maybe this situation with Jody Wilson-Raybould and the Prime Minister and SNC Lavalin and Gerry Butts maybe isn't as bad for Liberals as they think, and so now it's okay, let's hear from Jody Wilson-Raybould to tell her side of the story?
Well, I'm not here to speculate. I've been following the last 10 days, and in the past 24 hours, first with the resignation of Gerald Butts, a hardworking public servant. I'm very disappointed to see him go, but I thought when I read his letter that he was putting Canadians first. And then today, with Jody Wilson-Raybould coming out of Cabinet, and I believe she remains a valuable member of caucus, and we will hear from her, I understand, at Justice Committee. Okay,
Mr. Cooper, what can you connect those dots for us? What was Jody Wilson-Raybould doing at Cabinet this morning, and now the Liberals want to hear from her at committee when they didn't last week?
Yeah, I can't speak to what Ms. Wilson-Raybould was doing in Cabinet, but what I can say is that I had put forward a motion before the committee to hear from 9 witnesses, including Ms. Wilson-Raybould and officials in the PMO, including Gerald Butts, who met with SNC Lavalin on multiple occasions to discuss legal and justice issues, as well as Matthew Bouchard, who as well met with SNC Lavalin on legal and justice issues. What came out of committee today is that we are only hearing from Ms. Wilson-Raybould. And let me say, that is completely unacceptable. The fact is that what good is it to hear from Ms. Wilson-Raybould when she has, at this time, one arm tied around her back, which, namely by virtue of solicitor-client privilege, which the Prime Minister refuses to waive. So what we saw today was a continuation of what we saw last Wednesday, which is that Liberal MPs are doing the bidding of the PMO as part of a cover-up to deny Canadians from getting the answers that they deserve.
Okay, Mr. Angus, what do you think has happened here? What do you make of that kind of a development with Jody Wilson-Raybould back at a Cabinet meeting, now agreeing to come before? She said she will go, and then we'll decide what she can say after she talks to her lawyer about solicitor-client privilege and what she can say at the committee. Is this starting to feel like it was an inside family fight, or is it still something you're concerned that's deeper than this?
I think we need to look at the chaotic response of the Liberal government since this has unfolded. You know, every single day a different story. You know, the behind-the-scenes attempt to smear her. Today, the Prime Minister was in the House defending solicitor-client privilege while one of his own members was saying we'll have Jody Wilson-Raybould come before committee. So they're certainly trying to do this on the fly. I think they're not responding well to pressure. The resignation of Gerry Butts is enormously damaging for the credibility of the Prime Minister. So the two big issues that remain before anyone can feel that this government is dealt in any credible way is, are they going to waive solicitor-client privilege? Unless that's done, then attempting to have her and her alone at committee will only make matters worse for the Prime Minister. That's why we're asking him to come clean on this issue. And secondly, the fact that nobody from the PMO, including Gerry Butts, is going to be speaking makes this even more of a farce. Since yesterday, the Prime Minister said that Gerry Butts would be now free to defend himself. Well, how can he defend himself when the government's protecting him and not letting him come forward to give witness testimony? So I think we're far from being out of the woods on this, and I'm asking the Prime Minister, do the right thing, reassure public confidence, waive that solicitor-client privilege, and actually establish an independent inquiry, because the question of interference in a legal case, in the biggest corruption case in Canadian memory, these are serious allegations that go right to the heart of the Prime Minister.
Mona Fortier,
yes?
Let me have you pick up on this, and then Mr. Cooper, I'll come to you. Let me ask you that. So this would seem to be at this point still some kind, and it's hard to know at this point, what the level of disagreement was or the level of conflict was between Jody Wilson-Raybould and Mr. Butts, who's now resigned, saying he wants to be able to defend himself. Shouldn't the committee be hearing from Gerald Butts to find out what really happened here?
Well, the committee is independent. They can study the issue. I wasn't in the committee this afternoon, but I know that Jody Wilson-Raybould has been called to the committee. That's one step. I trust the Ethics Commissioner as an independent officer, officer of the Parliament, has a mandate right now to look at the issue, and we will wait to see his report.
What the Ethics Commissioner looks at is whether any public office holder did anything to further their own interests. That probably does not include looking at political pressure between two people in the government.
But I trust that his process is important to hear.
But why not hear from Jerry? If Jerry Butts was the problem, and wouldn't that satisfy Canadians to be able to hear from him as well? Jody Wilson-Raybould may give her version of events. Should Canadians be able to hear from Gerald Butts?
If he is asked to go, he will be able to decide if he goes or not.
Okay, Mr. Cooper, why do you need to hear from him?
Well, first of all, he met with SNC-Lavalin on multiple occasions. We know that. What was he doing meeting with them on all these occasions? We need to know the fact, what his conversations with Jody Wilson-Raybould were. He, after all, did meet with her, including in December with respect to the SNC-Lavalin matter. And thirdly, just yesterday upon resigning, and I know innocent people always resign, but that aside, he made a blanket denial of any pressure, any direction. Let him say that under oath. He needs to be tested.
Yeah, Mr. Angus, pick up on what you were saying earlier, but you still believe there's a need for an independent public inquiry here. Should that wait till we see some of what we get from a Justice Committee, or is that those two things can run in parallel?
Well, I don't think we can put much faith in the ability of the Justice Committee to do the work, because the Liberals are deep-sixing the ability of the Justice Committee to have a fulsome review, so it's not going to happen. So let's just be clear about that. The question of whether or not multiple behind-the-scenes lobbying meetings were held with SNC-Lavalin in order to slip through in a massive omnibus bill a change to the law that would favor one company in particular is a staggering to me, breach of everything that Parliament stands for in terms of oversight and establishing laws. If a law was put in to favor one company because of their lobbying, that needs to be looked at. If then the Justice Minister still felt that there was reasons to move ahead with the prosecution, and she was pressured by political staffers in the Prime Minister's office at the direction of the Prime Minister, or because, again, of backroom lobbying, that is a complete undermining of the accountability systems that we have for the rule of law in Canada. So that needs an independent inquiry. It also offers the Prime Minister a chance to say he's doing the right thing. If he has nothing to hide, if Jerry Butts has nothing to hide, if solicitor-client privilege is nothing to be concerned about, then an independent judge could look at this and report to Parliament and tell us what happened. But until we have those answers, this will continue to be a corrosive effect on the credibility of Justin Trudeau coming into the 2019 election.
Mona Forte, should the Prime Minister, well, let me put the question a lot of people are asking, why, as Mr. Angus says, why doesn't the Prime Minister waive solicitor-client privilege and say to Jody Wilson-Raybould, presumably she came to Cabinet today and told the story, why doesn't she tell it in front of Canadians?
Well, at this time, he has mandated the minister to look at the issue. The minister will get back to him and give him his recommendations. Let's let Minister Lametti do his work, and then the Prime Minister will have the recommendations to move forward.
But if you're watching this as a Canadian on the outside, what you're seeing here is some kind of a conflict, some kind of a dispute that led to the resignation of a cabinet minister. She's not in cabinet anymore, but she's at a cabinet meeting today talking to those cabinet colleagues. Should Canadians know what she was talking about?
Well, I wasn't in cabinet today.
No,
and
I know none of us were, but Canadians are watching this, and it looks like it's all happening inside the loop here. And some people are privy to what's happening here, and other people aren't privy to what's happening here, which is sure, that's the case in cabinet meetings.
Well, again, I let the Justice Committee ask the questions when she will be testifying.
Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
Yeah, I mean, it's just patently absurd that here we have a situation where the Justice Committee is going to hold hearings, but we're somehow not going to hear from anyone in the PMO. That is absurd. It just demonstrates that this is not a hearing that is going to get to the bottom of much of anything, especially in light of Ms. Wilson-Raybould having one arm tied behind her back. The only conclusion that Canadians can draw out of what happened today is that the cover-up continues.
Mr. Angus, where do you go from here with this?
Well, we will be bringing for vote on this independent inquiry, and I think it's going to look very bad on the Prime Minister to try and continue to play the ad hoc response that he's shown. Because just put it simply to Canadians, the allegation is that the Prime Minister's office pressured the Justice Minister inappropriately, and then she was punished for not going along. If any kind of deal or any kind of arrangement's been made, or if she's not allowed to speak fully, we're stuck with a situation where she can't fully speak, but the people who may have inappropriately pressured her are free not to give testimony. That is an absurd situation, so clearly we cannot trust a Liberal-dominated Justice Committee to be accountable to Canadians. This is why we need an independent inquiry.
All right. Thank you all for your time tonight. We'll continue to follow the story. Good to get your perspectives. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So lots to